Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we take stacks of technical papers and in-depth scientific research and, well, distill them down into essential, high-value knowledge.
And our mission today is a pretty rigorous one. We're diving straight into the world of applied mathematics and data physics.
We are definitely moving beyond the familiar. We're leaving the two-dimensional realm of, standard linear algebra and plunging headfirst into multilinear complexity.
That's right. And for those of you wrestling with data that is it's too rich, too high-dimensional to fit into a simple spreadsheet, this deep dive is for you.
Exactly.
Our source material today is a really comprehensive project paper that rigorously defines and then calculates the Tucker decomposition.
And that's the method you need if you want to efficiently compress and isolate critical features in data sets that go way beyond simple matrices. We're talking about high-rank tensors. So if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by a data set that has, say, time, location, frequency, and maybe a subject all influencing each other.
Oh, like hyperspectral satellite images.
Or complex neuroscientific recordings, right? Measured across hundreds of electrodes and thousands of time points. You just know that standard tools like singular value decomposition, SVD, they just run out of steam.
They completely run out of steam. They can't capture those complex multi-way interactions.
And that's exactly why we're here.
We need to upgrade our entire mathematical toolkit.
Okay, so let's start at the absolute foundation. Before we can even talk about breaking down a tensor, we first have to define what this mathematical beast actually is.
Right.
We all know the family tree, scalars, vectors, matrices. Where's the tensor fit in?
It's the natural and really the complete generalization. A tensor is a mathematical object that encompasses all of them.
All of them.
All of them. So a scalar is just a number. It needs 0 indices to describe it, so we call it a rank 0 tensor.
Okay.
A vector, well, it needs 1 index to locate a component, right? So it's a rank 1 tensor.
And a matrix needs 2 indices, a row and a column. So that makes it a rank 2 tensor. So we have T, then T sub I, then T sub I. If a matrix is rank 2, what's the simplest way to think about the next step up? What makes, say, a 3-way array a true tensor?
The defining characteristic is its rank, or sometimes people call it its order. And it's really simple. It's just the number of indices you need to label each component.
So as soon as you hit T sub I, or even higher,
you're officially in tensor territory. The moment you need 3 or more indices to pinpoint a number, you've moved into the world of multilinear algebra.
And it's important to stress this, right? It's not just about calling a big cube of numbers a tensor.
Not at all.
The underlying math, which our source material just briefly touches on, it dictates how that object behaves and transforms when you change your coordinate system.
Precisely. And that rigor is what ensures that the relationships within your data, they stay constant no matter how you look at them, how you orient your axes. It shows the object is capturing real structure in the data, not just some arbitrary arrangement of numbers.
Okay, so the takeaway for you, the listener, is that a tensor is really the only proper way to structure data where you have 3 or more factors that are all interacting with each other at the same time.
Right, and that leads us directly to the main mission here. Tensor decomposition.
Because these multidimensional arrays, they can be incredibly complex. I mean, computationally intensive.
Oh, absolutely. T is often defined in n dimensions. So, T's in the space, R to the I1 by I2, all the way to IN. We need a way to break that down
into simpler, more manageable, and I think most importantly, more interpretable components.
It is the ultimate data compression and feature isolation problem for the high-dimensional world. The goal isn't just to summarize the data. It's to approximate the original tensor, T, as a product of much, much simpler components.
And that's how you uncover those latent factors, those hidden structures.
Like a subtle pattern in financial data that, it only emerges when you consider time, sector, and risk all at the same time.
And the whole point is optimization, isn't it? We're trying to find the best possible reduced set of components that lets us rebuild the original tensor with the minimum possible error.
Absolutely. We're hunting for efficiency, but without sacrificing the meaningful information.
That sets the stage beautifully. So we need a general method for decomposing these high-rank objects, and the standard, the robust tool for that job, the true generalization of SVD, is the Tucker decomposition.
Yes, the Tucker decomposition. It's sometimes called higher order SVD or HOSVD, and it really is the cornerstone of multilinear algebra for data analysis.
So how does it work, fundamentally?
It essentially factorizes the tensor into two very distinct types of components. You get a small central tensor that kind of holds the guts of the data,
Okay.
and then you get a set of what are called factor matrices that define the new coordinates for each dimension.
Let's look at that central formula then. T is approximately G times 1U1 times 2U2, and so on. This looks complicated, but this is where the magic happens, right?
It is. So let's identify the players here. First up, we have G, the core tensor.
The core tensor.
This tensor, G, is the absolute heart of the decomposition. It exists in a much smaller space. So G is in R to the R1 by R2, all the way to Rn, where those R dimensions are generally much, much smaller than the original I dimensions.
Okay, so if our original tensor was enormous, say 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000, that's a billion elements. The core tensor G might be, what, 5 by 5 by 5?
Exactly, just 125 elements.
So what is G actually doing? How can it hold so much information?
This is where we have to distinguish Tucker from SVD, and honestly, it's the single most profound insight in this field.
Okay.
In standard SVD, the singular values tell you the magnitude of variance along these simple orthogonal directions. They're just linear principal components.
Right.
The core tensor G, on the other hand, contains the interaction structure, the crucial relationships between the modes of the data.
So it's not just about one direction being important.
No. It tells you how the principal component from dimension 1 interacts with the principal component from dimension 2, and so on. It's not just variance maximization, it's multilinear relationship mapping.
That's the real differentiator. In SVD, if component 1 is important, it's just important. But in Tucker, component 1 for mode A might only be important when it's paired with, say, component 3 from mode B. And G is what captures that pairing.
Exactly. G is the condensed essence that holds all those feature interactions.
Okay, so that's G. What's the second component?
The second set of components are the factor matrices, the U to the n. For each mode n of the tensor, we have a corresponding matrix Un, which is in space R to the In by Rn.
And these factor matrices, the U's, they're basically the higher order equivalent of singular vectors from SVD, correct?
They are. They define the new compressed basis for each individual mode. They capture the relationships within that single dimension, telling us how the original In elements relate to the new reduced set of Rn principal components. They define the rotation and scaling for that one specific axis.
Which brings us to the third and maybe most mysterious piece of that formula, the operation itself. That little x with the subscript n, what is the mode n product?
The mode n product is the key mechanism. It allows us to multiply a tensor by a matrix along only one specific dimension.
So it's not like normal matrix multiplication.
Not at all. For listeners who are used to matrix multiplication, A times B, which always involves summing over the inner dimensions, the mode n product is fundamentally different. It's selective. It's a multilinear operation.
That sounds incredibly hard to compute. How is it fundamentally different?
Well, it's harder because it doesn't follow that simple row-by-column rule. If you have T times 1U1 times 2U2, you have to do the operations sequentially on independent indices. Let's look at the mathematical definition from the source to really get it.
Okay.
The definition states, the result at a new set of indices is the sum over the original index In of the tensor T element times the U matrix element.
All right, let's break that down verbally because that's dense. We're taking an element from the factor matrix U, multiplying it by the corresponding slice of the tensor T, and then summing everything up over that original index In.
Exactly. And the result of that summation replaces that old index, In, with the new reduced index, Rn.
So you're basically performing a rotation along just one dimension n.
Yes. And crucially, all the other dimensions, I1, I2, etc., they remain fixed. They are completely untouched by this specific multiplication.
And that independence is what makes it multilinear, not just linear. It's like dimensionality reduction happening surgically, mode by mode.
And that surgical precision is why Tucker is so powerful for compression. You get to define a different compression factor, different Rn for each dimension. You can tailor the fit precisely to the data structure.
That's the power of arbitrary rank selection.
Right. And those Rn ranks define the compressed core tensor G. By choosing low Rns, we dramatically reduce the number of parameters needed to represent the tensor, which is a huge computational saving, while still preserving the essential feature interactions stored in G.
Now, practically speaking, how do you actually calculate these optimal factor matrices and the core tensor? It can't be a simple one-step formula like it is for matrix SVD.
It rarely is,
Okay.
because the factor matrices, the U's, they're all interdependent. We typically use an iterative optimization approach. It's called alternating least squares, or ALS.
Alternating least squares.
Yeah. The first step is often a rough estimate, which you get from the method we're about to discuss, using SVD on the unfoldings. But then ALS refines that guess.
So how does ALS work?
In ALS, you fix all the factor matrices except for one, say U1. Then you solve for the best possible U1 that minimizes the reconstruction error.
Okay, so you lock everything else down and just optimize one piece.
Exactly. Then you fix that new U1 and all the others, and you solve for U2, and you just repeat this process, cycling through all modes until the error stops getting smaller. It's a really powerful convergence-based method that finds the most accurate, low-rank approximation.
So SVD gives us a great starting point, a good first guess, but ALS is the engine that really polishes that approximation into the optimal result. That context helps a lot. Okay, so minimizing error is the goal, but the process of actually calculating those initial factor matrices relies on this brilliant practical maneuver, something that lets us, I guess, temporarily cheat and apply robust 2D tools to our n-dimensional problem. And that bridge is called tensor unfolding or metricization.
Unfolding is well, you could call it a necessary evil, or maybe an elegant cheat. It's what connects the world of multilinear algebra to the known robustness of linear algebra.
Because as we've said, algorithms like SVD are only defined for two-dimensional matrices.
Right. So to leverage SVD on a high-order tensor, we have to systematically convert that tensor into a 2D matrix. And we do that by rearranging its elements according to a specific mode.
I'm thinking of it like this. If you have a densely packed roll of film, which is a 3D object, unfolding it means unspooling it into a long, flat 2D strip.
That's a great analogy.
You still have all the data points, all the frames, but you've temporarily redefined their relationship to fit into a simple row-column format.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the critical challenge is making sure that when you flatten the data, you maintain a logical order that reflects the fibers along the dimension you chose. That's crucial for the SVD to successfully capture the variance along that axis.
So how does this flattening work mechanically? What defines the dimensions of the resulting matrix?
It depends entirely on the mode n that you choose to unfold along. If we have a tensor T in R to the I1 by I2 and so on, unfolding it along the nth mode results in a matrix we call T sub n.
T with the parentheses.
Right. And the dimensions of this matrix are In by the product of all the other dimensions.
Okay, let's focus on that. The rows of the new matrix always correspond exactly to the dimension of the mode you chose, In.
Always.
And all the other dimensions are just multiplied together, flattened out to form the columns.
We can use the sources example to make this really concrete. Use a simple three-way tensor, T that is. Let's say 2 by 3 by 4, 24 elements in total.
Okay, let's start with mode 1 unfolding, T sub 1.
Right, so here, the first dimension, which was size 2, defines the rows. So we have 2 rows. The columns are formed by flattening the product of the other 2 dimensions, 3 times 4, which is 12.
So the resulting unfolded matrix, T sub 1, is 2 by 12.
Correct. And the source emphasizes that the fibers along mode 1, you can imagine 2 3 by 4 slices stacked one behind the other, they become the rows in this new matrix. The SVD we perform on this matrix will then tell us the basis for that first dimension.
Okay, so now mode 2 unfolding, T sub 2.
Now the second dimension, which was size 3, defines the rows. The columns flatten the first and third dimension, so 2 times 4 is 8. The resulting matrix, T sub 2, is 3 by 8.
And the variance we'd analyze now with SVD is primarily along the second axis of the original tensor.
Exactly. And finally, mode 3 unfolding, T sub 3. The third dimension, size 4, defines the rows. The columns flatten the first 2, 2 times 3, which is 6. So the result, T sub 3, is 4 by 6.
The genius here is really twofold then. First, we get to use the existing, incredibly fast and stable SVD algorithms that have been optimized for decades.
Huge benefit.
And second, by unfolding along different modes, we're getting 3 completely different 2D perspectives on the exact same underlying 3D data.
That's it. Unfolding transforms the data, allowing us to apply these standard, robust matrix techniques to each dimension independently. And crucially, the SVD on T sub n extracts the factor matrix UN, which describes the basis only for the nth mode.
And that's the only way we can reliably get those separate compressed bases, U1, U2, U3, that we need for the Tucker formula.
Exactly. Without this intermediate step, we would have to devise entirely new, complex, and probably unstable algorithms just for n-dimensional arrays.
Yeah.
It's a massive computational headache that we completely bypass with this clever trick.
So unfolding gives us the input matrices, T sub n, which we can just call A, and now we deploy the engine, SVD.
Right.
And our source material provides a highly detailed 10-step process for computing SVD on an unfolded matrix A. This is where we need to slow down and really get the intuition behind the math.
Agreed. For each mode, we run SVD on A, which is our T sub n. The whole goal is to get a decomposition, A equals U sigma V transpose.
And that left singular vector matrix, U, that's what's going to become our factor matrix, UN.
That's the prize. So let's walk through the mechanics and let's focus on the steps that often confuse people, like the relationship between covariance, eigenvalues, and singular vectors.
Okay. Step 1 is the unfolding itself. We've established that. We take our tensor, unfold it along mode 1, and we get our matrix A.
Step 2 is computing the transpose, AT. Just swap the rows and columns. This is a simple operation, but it's immediately required for the next, more important step.
Step 3, computing the gram matrix, A transpose A. This product gives us a symmetric square matrix, and this matrix is absolutely central to SVD. Why is that?
Well, A transpose A is proportional to the sample covariance matrix of the columns of A. If you center your data first, it is the covariance matrix.
Okay, so it tells us about the variance.
It tells us about the relationship and the variance structure among the elements in that flattened dimension space, the columns. By analyzing A transpose A, we're finding the directions, the eigenvectors, in that high-dimensional column space where the data shows the most variance. This is the core of principal component analysis, PCA, which is very closely related to SVD.
So we're simplifying the spread of the data. Instead of looking at millions of different directions, we're finding the few best directions that explain most of the data's movement.
Precisely. Which brings us to step 4, determining the eigenvalues, omega, and eigenvectors. We have to solve that classic equation. MV equals omega V, where M is our A transpose A matrix.
And the eigenvectors, V, these are the right singular vectors of A, and they represent these directions of maximum data variance.
And the eigenvalues, omega, are the scaling factors. They quantify just how much variance is captured along each of those directions.
The source notes the use of np.lionelg.ea in the code, and that small detail seems important.
It is, because as you mentioned, that specific function is optimized for symmetric matrices, like A transpose A. It guarantees that our eigenvalues are real and non-negative, and it ensures computational stability.
Next is step 5, sorting. We have to sort the eigenvalues in descending order. This might sound like just a procedural thing, but it's absolutely critical for compression.
It's everything. The components associated with the largest eigenvalues are the dominant, most significant features. The smaller ones are generally just noise or minor variations that we can safely discard for a low-rank approximation.
So this sorting step is where we decide how much compression we're going to get later on. If we only want to keep the top 5 components, we're trusting that the top 5 sorted eigenvalues capture, say, 99% of the important information.
Exactly right. And the ratio of the sum of the top R eigenvalues to the sum of all of them tells you the exact percentage of variance explained.
Okay, so step 6 is forming matrix V. We take those sorted eigenvectors and arrange them as columns to form V, the right singular vector matrix.
And V defines the orthogonal basis for the domain space of our unfolded matrix A. By sorting the columns of V according to the eigenvalues, we've ensured that the very first column, V1, is the single best direction, the first principal component for representing the column space of A.
Now, step 7, computing singular values,
Yeah.
epsilon. We just take the square roots of the eigenvalues.
Right, and the singular values represent the magnitude of the components. They are always real and non-negative, and they serve as the direct measure of a feature's contribution to the overall structure.
And step 8 is constructing the diagonal matrix, sigma. We place those sorted singular values along the diagonal.
And sigma is our scale factor matrix. So if we decide to compress to set our rank Rn to be less than the maximum rank IN, we just truncate sigma, we chop it off, effectively throwing away the smallest singular values that correspond to that noise we identified back in step 5.
Then step 9, computing matrix U. This is the big one. This is the extraction of the factor matrix itself. The formula is U equals A times V times sigma inverse.
And this U matrix is what we were after the whole time. It's the left singular vector matrix. Its columns represent the orthogonal components for the rows of A. And in the context of Tucker decomposition, this U matrix derived from T sub n is precisely the factor matrix UN that we need.
Its columns define the new compressed coordinate system for the nth mode of the tensor.
Perfect.
And finally, step 10 is verification. We check the decomposition by reconstructing A from U, sigma, and V, a crucial sanity check.
It is. You have to make sure the SVD foundation is mathematically sound before you move on to the higher order stuff. And remember, this is a complete 10-step cycle that gets repeated for every single dimension of our tensor.
So if we have a 5-way tensor.
You do this exact process 5 times.
Yeah.
And you get 5 distinct factor matrices, U1 all the way through U5.
Okay, so the SVD process gives us the raw materials, the factor matrices. The full Tucker algorithm then has to coordinate all of these materials across all the modes to build the final compressed structure. Let's just summarize that flow.
Right, the full algorithm is roughly 7 high-level steps. Step 1, you have your tensor T. Step 2, you unfold T along all its modes.
Yep.
Step 3, you perform SVD on all of those unfolded matrices to get your initial U matrices.
And step 4 is extracting the factor matrices, ABC. And this is where we actually execute the dimensionality reduction. We decide on our target ranks, the RNs, and we only keep the top RN columns of those U matrices we got from SVD.
And this choice of RN is a huge practical consideration. You know, a full rank Tucker decomposition where RN equals IN, it gives you perfect reconstruction, but 0 compression.
Right, no benefit.
No benefit. We only get feature extraction and compression when RN is less than IN. And choosing that rank involves analyzing the percentage of variance explained by the singular values. There are formal ways to do this, like looking at a scree plot.
So we're making a calculated trade-off. We accept a tiny bit of reconstruction error in exchange for massive compression and feature isolation.
Precisely. Let's ground this with a numerical example from the source again, that little 2 by 2 by 2 example.
Okay.
If we decided to do a rank 2-2-2 decomposition, so full rank just for illustration, the factor matrices A, B, and C would capture the 2 most significant components for each mode.
And looking at the numerical structure from the source, those matrices capture the orthogonal basis of each dimension. For example, factor matrix A for mode 1 is a matrix with values like -0.376 and 0.927. You can just see a clear orthogonal structure. It's a clean rotation of the original basis.
And it's the same for factor matrix B and factor matrix C. You get these 3 small orthogonal matrices that define the feature space for each axis. All the redundancy is gone. All that's left are the pure principal components.
Now for step 5, computing the core tensor G. This is the moment of synthesis where all the modes are compressed at the same time.
Right. And G is obtained by projecting the original tensor T onto the transposes of all the vector matrices. So G equals T, mode 1 product A transpose, mode 2 product to B transpose, and so on.
So we're effectively rotating the tensor T into this new compressed coordinate system defined by A, B, and C. And you said we use the transposes of the factor matrices.
That's key mathematically because A is orthogonal, A transpose is its inverse. So by multiplying by the transpose, we are mapping the original data onto these new reduced bases.
And given how complicated this multilinear product is, this is where you need specialized library functions. The source mentions np.tensor or the incredibly useful Einstein summation, np.einsum.
Yes, these specialized functions manage the staggering index summation required to compute G. And the result, G, is our dense small feature map. Let's look at the numerical result for G from the 2 by 2 by 2 example.
The core tensor G is, in this case, another 2 by 2 by 2 tensor, and it's just full of these complex floating point numbers. The first slice has values like 0.426, 1.306.
And that array G is everything. If the original tensor T was I1 by I2 by I3, G is the R1 by R2 by R3 condensed representation.
So what does a single element of G tell us?
The element G at position R1, R2, R3. It tells you the intensity of the interaction between the R1th principal component of mode 1, the R2th component of mode 2, and the R3th component of mode 3. The density of meaning is why compression is even possible.
So the single tiny object, G, defines the entire underlying structure of the data, stripped of all the redundancy and noise, leaving only the complex relationships. We've isolated the structure in G, and we've defined the bases in A, B, and C. So step 6 is tensor reconstruction. We have to put the puzzle back together. T reconstructed equals G, mode 1 product A, mode 2 product B, and so on. Why is reconstruction so important if the whole goal was decomposition?
Well, as we discussed, reconstruction is the ultimate proof of success. If we used a low-rank approximation where Rn is less than IN, the reconstructed tensor will be the best possible compressed version of the original.
And if we used a full rank,
it should match almost perfectly.
Let's just reiterate that formal math for reconstruction because it really demonstrates the computational load required to generate just one element of the original data.
To reconstruct a single element, T at position I1, I2, I3, you have to sum over all the ranks, R1, R2, R3 of the core tensor.
The formula is a big summation.
T equals the sum over R1, R2, R3 of A times B times C times G.
So that means we multiply the components from the factor matrices by the corresponding element in the core tensor, and then sum all of those results up to define just one single position in the reconstructed tensor.
It's a massive operation.
Given that intensity, is this why the computational cost of reconstruction, especially for large, dense tensors, can become a real problem in large-scale machine learning?
Absolutely. The reconstruction itself is computationally expensive, especially if your ranks, the RNs, are large. But the real value lies in manipulating the compressed representation.
Ah, so you work with G.
Right. If you want to filter or denoise or analyze features, you do it on the much smaller G, and you only reconstruct the parts you absolutely need to see at the end.
And step 7 is verification. The source used the Frobenius norm to compare the original T and the reconstructed T. If the error is below some small tolerance, the decomposition succeeded.
And the numerical confirmation in the source, where that 2 by 2 by 2 example was reconstructed perfectly, proves that the whole multilinear factorization is mathematically sound. It closes the loop. We have a robust method for going from high-dimensional data to its bases, to its interaction structure, and back again.
Okay, and now we shift to the why it matters. Tucker decomposition isn't just an elegant mathematical trick. It drives real data analysis. Let's get into the applications mentioned in the source, starting with feature extraction.
In high-dimensional data, the sheer volume of variables can just obscure the truth. Tucker decomposition clarifies this by identifying the most dominant features which are contained in that core tensor, G.
Give us a real-world example.
Okay, think about a tensor in climate modeling. You might have T with dimensions of time, location, pressure, and temperature, a four-way tensor. Standard SVD might tell you that time variance is the most important component. But Tucker, through G, might reveal that the most dominant feature is actually the interaction between, say, a specific high-pressure system, that's a principal component 3 of the pressure mode, and a rapid drop in temperature, principal component 1 of the temperature mode.
Happening in a certain geographical location.
Principal component 2 of location, all happening during the spring, which is principal component 4 of time.
That's a huge distinction. SVD tells you about individual variance. Tucker tells you about the combined signature that drives the phenomenon.
Precisely. It lets us pinpoint that critical multilinear relationship, that signature, that we can then use for prediction or classification.
Okay, second application, data compression and dimensionality reduction.
This is critical as datasets hit petabyte scale. If you're running machine learning models on massive multi-way structures, like brain activity from an EEG,
Where you'd have time, frequency, electrode, patient.
exactly, you simply cannot afford to store and process the full dense tensor. It's too big.
So Tucker's ability to reduce, say, a 100 by 100 by 100 by 100 tensor, that's 100 million elements, down to a compressed structure with a tiny 5 by 5 by 5 by 5 core tensor.
In 4 100 by 5 factor matrices, it offers astronomical savings in storage and computation time, often with a tiny loss in information quality, maybe less than 1% error.
And finally, the wide range of fields using this: data mining, signal processing, machine learning.
Think about recommendation systems. A matrix might track user by movie. A tensor could track user by movie by time of day by device used.
Much more nuanced.
Much more. Tucker can pull apart these interacting influences to give a much more accurate prediction than a simple 2D matrix ever could. Or in data mining, if you're looking for anomalous network traffic patterns influenced by time, source IP location, and packet type, Tucker is essential for quickly isolating that unusual interaction signature in G.
The versatility is what makes it so valuable. This has been a truly illuminating deep dive. We started with the mathematical necessity of moving beyond 2D data analysis to handle modern, high-dimensional arrays. We defined the tensor and established the elegance of the Tucker decomposition.
And we established the necessity of tensor unfolding matricization as that clever, practical step that allowed us to convert n-dimensional complexity into a series of 2D matrices.
And then we leveraged the tried-and-true singular value decomposition, the SVD engine, on each of those unfolded matrices.
We did. We walked through that detailed 10-step SVD process, emphasizing the role of the Gram matrix in finding variance.
Which in turn allowed us to extract the factor matrices A, B, and C. These matrices define the new compressed basis for each individual mode.
And with those factor matrices, we computed this small but information-dense core tensor G. We spent a lot of time showing that G is the real breakthrough. It holds the essential multilinear interaction structure of the data.
Not just simple variance components.
Not at all. Critically, we proved the entire structure works by successfully reconstructing the original tensor T with minimal error.
The entire process really relies on this core mathematical insight, that the vast amount of information in a multidimensional data set can be condensed into that small core tensor G and its associated factor matrices. It's the ultimate shortcut to understanding massive complexity.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you to consider. This move from 2D linear algebra to multilinear algebra, it's more than just a computational upgrade. It's a conceptual shift in how we interpret our data.
How so?
Well, in standard SVD, principal components are just orthogonal directions in a flat space, capturing simple variance. But in Tucker decomposition, where the core tensor G captures the interaction across multiple reduced rank subspaces, how should we conceptually define a feature?
Is a feature in a tensor still just a direction?
Or is it now inherently a complex multilinear relationship signature that only exists when 3 or more factors align just right? That is the foundational question that the mathematics of tensors forces us all to answer.